Aubrey Graham, Drizzy himself, spent 2 years telling the world he was at war with his label, that he was trapped in a corrupt machine, that he was the brave artist fighting for freedom. And then on May 15th, 2026, he quietly dropped 3 albums, all stamped with the UMG logo he was supposedly dismantling. All while his lawsuit against that same label was still alive in court. The Iceman campaign was never a rebellion. It was a job application. And A$AP Rocky, the man Drake couldn't stop name-dropping on Iceman, just showed up to his own tour, played the diss track to Drake's face, and put owls in a scope next to rats on the closing screen. Drake really thought writing "Free Me from my label" in a bar was the same thing as actually leaving, and it's embarrassing. Before we get into it, like, subscribe, don't miss it, nah. Aubrey Drake Graham, Drizzy, the Sixth God, call him whatever, dropped his 9th studio album Iceman alongside 2 surprise companion projects, Maid of Honour and Habibti, simultaneously on May 15th, 2026, under OVO Sound and Republic Records, which is, of course, a division of Universal Music Group, the label he is actively suing. All 3 albums carry the UMG imprint. Hits Daily Double subsequently reported that the triple drop reportedly fulfilled his contractual obligations to the label, a deal reportedly worth around $400 million that was signed back in 2022. Akademiks, Drake's own media ally, had already been publicly theorizing that a new UMG deal was inevitable, framing it not as a defeat, but as a business inevitability. Meanwhile, A$AP Rocky, Rakim Mayer's Pretty Flacco, launched his Don't Be Dumb tour and made it very clear in the outro visuals exactly what he thinks of Drake and Iceman. Drake spent 2 years telling fans he was fighting the machine, and apparently the machine just gave him his next paycheck. Alright y'all, let's get into the actual receipts because this is where it all falls apart for Drake, and I mean falls apart. Let's start with the albums themselves because this is the smoking gun nobody wants to talk about directly enough. On May 15th, 2026, Drake dropped Iceman, Maid of Honour, and Habibti, 43 tracks total, all in one night. When fans and media looked at the credits, Complex confirmed every single one of those projects was listed as released by OVO, under exclusive license to Republic Records, a division of UMG Recordings Incorporated. When I saw that, I literally had to read it twice. This is the same UMG that Drake filed a formal defamation lawsuit against in January 2025. The same label he accused of running a campaign to create a viral hit out of Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us, spreading what he called a false factual allegation in his legal filings. And here he is dropping albums, 3 of them, right back through their distribution. Bro really filed paperwork calling his label corrupt and then handed them 43 tracks. That's the move of someone who is not trying to win a war. That's someone settling their tab. Now here's where Akademiks, Drake's most consistent media cheerleader, becomes Exhibit A in his own man's case. During a Vlad TV interview, Akademiks addressed the rumor that Iceman would be Drake's final album under UMG. His response was essentially, nah, that deal is coming. He theorized that UMG would overpay to keep Drake because the artist is too commercially valuable to lose, and that new releases continuously fuel streams on the back catalog. He framed UMG potentially offering Drake some kind of addendum deal, even an additional collab album, after Iceman fulfilled a contract. When I heard this, I was like, wait, hold on. Your guy AK, who has Drake's ear and whose mouth Drake has literally used to deny leaked DMs before, is out here publicly framing a new UMG deal as the expected and desired outcome? And we're supposed to believe the "free me from my label" bars were a serious declaration of independence? Nah, bruh. AK didn't accidentally say that.
He says what needs to be said.
Then there's the on-record evidence Drake dropped the actual music, and this is what makes it so wild. On Iceman, on a track called Janice SDFU, Drake raps, "Swear my label gotta free me, baby." On Make Them Pay, he goes, "I'm better off independent, they should let him leave. Yes slash, 'cause I just wanna be free." And on Bees on the Table featuring 21 Savage, he rapped, "I'm fighting the man, not suing a rapper. You boys are not listening." When I heard these back to back, I had to laugh. Because here is a man putting "let me go" rhetoric on an album that he simultaneously handed to the label he wants to leave. That's not rebellion. That's a marketing angle. If Kendrick Lamar put those bars on an album, he wouldn't be releasing it through the entity he was beefing with 2 weeks later. There's a difference between writing about fighting the machine and actually fighting it. And let's bring in the context around the $$ for You collab with Party Next Door, because Akademiks also went on record earlier in 2025 claiming that Drake's collaborative album got essentially no radio play because of his UMG tensions. He posted on X that the reason $$ for You wasn't getting radio rotation was specifically tied to Drake's legal battle with the label. He also noted the album was released through a split arrangement involving Republic, UMG's subsidiary, and Santa Ana Group, and said a deal had been worked out to resolve these issues for single promotion. That tells you the label machinery never fully cut off. There were always active negotiations, deals being worked out, compromises happening, even at the height of the supposed war. Drake's PR team wanted you to see a prisoner breaking chains. Akademiks accidentally keeps showing you someone renegotiating their contract. And then there's A$AP Rocky, Rakim Mayers, who dropped Don't Be Dumb on January 16, 2026, and made his feelings about Drake extremely clear through the album and through his tour outro. On Stole Ya Flow, Rocky rapped, "First you stole my flow, so I stole yo be asterisk TCH." He told the New York Times podcast, and I quote, "I think we all know," when asked whether Drake was the subject. He confirmed the origins were people who started out as friends becoming foes who started sending shots. Then on the Don't Be Dumb tour, Rocky closed his show with outro visuals that featured owls, the OVO symbol, appearing in a crosshair scope, followed by images of rats. Kirko on Twitter caught it first. "When I watched that clip, I was like, NH, this is creative and it's pointed." Rocky told Drake exactly what he thinks of him, in a way that was artistic enough that Drake can't really respond to it without looking even worse. Now, let's connect the dots, because the timeline here is everything, and it reveals a story that makes Drake's whole fighting the machine narrative fall apart at a structural level. The foundational deal you need to understand. According to Now Toronto and multiple industry sources, Drake signed a deal with UMG in 2022 reportedly valued at approximately $400 million. That's the deal that was in play this entire era, through the Kendrick beef, through the lawsuits, through all of it. Understand that when you think about everything that follows. January 2025, Drake files a formal defamation lawsuit against UMG, accusing the label of promoting and profiting from Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us. He names over 20 individual UMG executives in the amended complaint filed in April 2026, calling the Super Bowl halftime performance orchestrated to assassinate the character of another artist. Sounds like war, right? But here's what y'all didn't clock. While that lawsuit was building, Akademiks was already telegraphing what was really happening. Back when $$ for You dropped in February 2025, AK was online explaining how the album's radio situation was being worked out, how deals were being brokered between UMG and other entities involved in Drake's releases. Not chaos. Not warfare. Negotiation. There's a massive difference. Then, October 2025, the defamation lawsuit gets dismissed. Judge Jeanette Vargas rules that Kendrick's claims were non-actionable opinion. Drake appeals in January 2026. UMG fires back in March 2026, calling Drake's position astoundingly hypocritical in their legal filing. And Drake called them hypocrites. It looked like a real fight. Then May 15, 2026, 43 tracks drop under the UMG umbrella in one night. Hits Daily Double reports this fulfills Drake's contractual obligations. Akademiks, weeks before the drop, had already framed a post-Iceman deal as a near certainty. That's not coincidence. That's coordinated narrative management. And if anyone knows how Drake manages narratives through Akademiks, you already know the playbook. These things don't get said in public accidentally. Now compare this to O'Shea Jackson Jr., Ice Cube's son, an artist who knows the industry, who went on X the day of the release and posted, "Did he drop 3 albums to get out the deal?" That's someone with industry DNA looking at this drop and immediately identifying it as a contractual maneuver, not a creative one. When a legacy hip-hop family looks at your release strategy and sees debt repayment, not artistry, that's a problem. The deeper pattern here is this. Drake spent 2 years building a persona rooted in "the industry is against me," right at the moment when the one thing he was genuinely losing was fan engagement and cultural relevance. The UMG drama gave him a storyline. The lawsuit gave him something to point at. The Iceman branding built an entire mythology around the idea of a man who runs cold under pressure and fights alone. But every single business move throughout this entire period, the split distribution, the radio deals being brokered, the catalog remaining with UMG even after the contract fulfillment, tells you the relationship never actually broke down the way it was presented publicly. Drake never lost the machine's support. He just needed his fans to think he did. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, y'all. Because there are layers here that most people are glossing over, and when you zoom in, it gets wild. Start with the lyrics, "Swear my label gotta free me, baby," from Janice STFU. Now on the surface, people heard that as a genuine cry of frustration from an artist in a bad deal. But think about what "gotta free me" actually means grammatically. Gotta implies obligation, inevitability. He's not saying they won't free me or they're refusing to free me. He's saying they have to. As in, the exit is coming. He's framing it as a foregone conclusion while still inside the deal. That's not a hostage speaking. That's someone signaling to the business world and to UMG themselves that the clock is winding down and a new negotiation is about to begin. That line is written for the room where the next deal gets negotiated, not for the fans who are supposed to think he's suffering. Drake didn't write that bar, he sent a business message disguised as a bar. Now look at the decision to drop 3 albums simultaneously. The Animal House pointed out that Prince did something structurally similar in mid-90s, flooding the market with releases to rapidly fulfill his Warner Brothers contract obligations and escape to independence. Prince called his contract slavery, wrote "slave" on his face, and released vault material at breakneck speed. But here's the difference nobody wants to say. Prince was doing it to actually get free. He was releasing material he already had, burning through the contract. Drake dropped 43 new songs across 3 fully produced projects. That's not frantic escape. That's a calculated 3-album sprint to the finish line that maximizes streaming metrics, Billboard chart real estate, and commercial leverage for the next deal. It's not Prince's desperation. It's an executive's chess move. And then there's the tour outro from Rocky. Everyone clocked the owl and the rat. But let me break down the specific choice of framing it in a scope, that crosshair visual. Rocky isn't just saying Drake is a rat. He's saying he's had Drake in his sights for a while. The scope imagery implies surveillance, patience, precision. This is Rocky saying he saw what was coming and he's ready. It recontextualizes the entire Don't Be Dumb rollout as not just an album era, but a preparation period. And the fact that it references the Nokia music video aesthetic suggests Rocky's been building this specific message across the entire album era. That's not an improvised diss. That's a campaign. One more thing y'all need to understand about the Akademiks signal specifically. Drake has used AK as a mouthpiece before. When the leaked DM about UMG surfaced in early 2025, Drake denied it through Akademiks. Not through a statement, not through his lawyer, through AK's platform. So when Akademiks goes on Vlad TV and starts framing a new UMG deal as basically inevitable and desirable, with the level of detail and confidence he uses, that's not just one commentator speculating. That pattern of using AK as a controlled leak valve is established behavior. The New Deal talk isn't AK going rogue, it's AK doing what he does. So, how has the media framed all this? Because it's been all over the place, and that split tells you everything about who's willing to say what. Hot New Hip Hop covered the 3-album release with a piece framed primarily around the commercial angle, the sales projections, the Billboard positioning, the first-week numbers. They noted the UMG connection but treated it as a curiosity, not a contradiction. The framing was essentially, Drake dropped 3 huge albums, the UMG situation is murky, and the commercial success speaks for itself. That's the industry-friendly read. You celebrate the numbers without interrogating what the numbers cost. The source ran a piece reporting that Hits Daily Double described the triple album release as a win-win for both Drake and UMG, with the catalog reportedly staying with Universal. Win-win. Let that sit for a second. A man publicly suing his label for defamation, rapping "Free Me" on tracks, filing 100-page legal complaints, and the industry publication of record frames the resolution as a win-win? That framing buries the lead completely. If it was win-win, why the 2-year performance of victimhood? Now, Toronto actually went harder. They quoted music commentator Eric Alper directly pointing out that the 3-album drop adds to the album requirements of Drake's high-value $400 million agreement with UMG in a fraction of the usual time. They also quoted an industry source who confirmed the contract theory was the prevailing read. That outlet actually gave real context without softening it into a press release. Now, some people, and you see this in the comments everywhere, will say Drake filing the lawsuit proves the beef with UMG was real. And look, I hear that. A lawsuit is not nothing. But here's why that argument doesn't hold. The lawsuit was specifically about defamation around Not Like Us and the botting allegations, not about his actual recording deal or his desire to leave. You can be upset about specific grievances with a business partner and still renew your contract with them. Those are not mutually exclusive. Companies sue each other and do new deals all the time. The lawsuit was real. The "I am escaping the system forever" narrative was the performance. And Drake's own fans who defended him hardest on this, the ones who said he was like a union rep for artists, who said he was exposing corruption for the greater good, those fans got played the hardest. If you still think the whole label war narrative was genuine after seeing 3 albums drop with the UMG stamp while the lawsuit was still live, you're not analyzing the situation. You're invested in the story Drake told you. Here's what nobody is saying loudly enough, and I'm going to say it clearly. Drake did not build the "I'm fighting UMG" narrative because he was actually fighting UMG. He built it because the one thing money, bots, and a $400 million deal cannot buy is genuine fan investment. And he was losing that fast after the Kendrick situation. Let's be honest about the timeline. After Not Like Us took over the summer of 2024, after Kendrick's Super Bowl performance in 2025 drew 133.5 million viewers with that song in the setlist, after Drake's lawsuit got publicly described by UMG's own lawyers as him trying to save face for his unsuccessful rap battle, Drake was at an emotional low with his audience. Not in terms of streams, not in terms of label support, those things were still there. In terms of people actually caring about him as a figure, as a voice, as someone to root for. That's what was gone. And what's the one narrative structure that makes people root for someone hardest? The underdog against the system. The artist versus the machine. David versus Goliath. Drake's team identified the one thing that could reignite emotional investment from his fanbase. A story where he is the persecuted, the brave, the independent spirit fighting a corrupt industry, and they built that story. Not from nothing. The lawsuit grievances were real. The friction with radio promotion was documented. But the framing of Drake as some kind of industry revolutionary? That was manufactured for audience consumption. Compare it to Jay-Z, who actually built Tidal, actually built Rock Nation, actually negotiated ownership structures that changed what artists could get. Or Kanye West, Ye, who went independent in a real sense, released Donda and subsequent projects without the traditional label machinery, and faced real commercial consequences for going against the system while maintaining his creative control. Or look at what Michael Jackson and Prince actually endured when they fought their labels for real. MJ couldn't release music. Prince literally could not get permission to put out albums during certain periods. These were artists who faced actual blacklisting, real industry exile. Meanwhile, Drake released 4 projects under the UMG umbrella during this entire war period, got radio promotion brokered for him, had streaming platforms reportedly boosting his visibility, and was receiving the same machine support he always had. The psychological warfare angle here is that Drake knew exactly what narrative would hit hardest with his specific audience. People who feel like the system is rigged, people who root for the guy willing to challenge authority. That's not a small demographic. That's a huge portion of hip-hop fandom. And he programmed his fanbase to interpret every piece of the story through that lens. Someone criticizes Drake? That's the machine talking. Streams are low? That's UMG tanking him. ASAP Rocky's tour gets mocked online? That's Drake's coordinated bots. And look, that part might even be true, but it gets used to reinforce the larger us versus them mythology. The emotional architecture was built so tightly that any outside criticism looked like proof of persecution. That's not coincidence. That is psychological audience management at a very high level. The part that stings for the real hip-hop fans is this. Drake used a template borrowed from artists who actually fought and actually suffered to manufacture a story for streaming-era attention economics. He cosplayed Prince without changing his name. He cosplayed MJ without risking his catalog. He put Free Me in bars and then fulfilled his contract on schedule. And when the next deal gets announced, because based on everything Akademiks has been laying out, it is coming, the fans who screamed loudest about Drake the Rebel are going to have to decide whether they were followers of an artist or followers of a story. That's the real conversation hip-hop needs to have right now. Not just about Drake, but about how easily audiences get drawn into narratives that are constructed to monetize their loyalty. And that's the truth they won't tell you. So, what happens next? Because this story is nowhere near finished, and the next few moves are going to be very revealing. Here's what's most likely to happen. Within the next few months, there's going to be a new Drake deal with Universal Music Group. Akademiks has already laid the groundwork publicly, framing it as something close to inevitable given Drake's commercial value and UMG's need to keep his catalog in-house. When that announcement comes, it's going to be dressed up as some kind of mutual resolution, a statement about Drake being a valued artist with an exciting future with a label. And the fans who spent 2 years being told Drake was the brave soldier fighting the machine are going to have a choice to make. Watch how many of them just accept it and move on, because that's what happens when the narrative manager is skilled enough. Drake's gonna call it a victory. He got a new deal on his terms, he'll say. The lawsuit forced them to respect him. That's the spin that's coming, and a lot of people will buy it. What's actually happening is a company keeping its most reliable product on the roster. That's it. Now, if Drake does something genuinely surprising and walks away, actually tests independence the way his Iceman bars implied, watch how fast the reality sets in. The industry infrastructure that supports a major label artist is enormous. Radio promotion, playlist placement, marketing budgets, distribution scale. Ye went independent, and while he maintained his cultural voice, the commercial machinery around him thinned out significantly. Drake has never operated without that machinery. He doesn't have a proven independent business model in music. OVO Sound, as a real label for other artists, no shade to their roster, has not produced the kind of revenue engine that would sustain Drake-level operations. If he actually does go independent, the first album cycle without the UMG machinery is going to be the real test of whether the I can do this alone narrative was ever anything more than content. And I genuinely do not think that test goes well for him. Because building an independent empire requires a kind of business discipline and risk tolerance that nothing in Drake's career arc has suggested he actually has. Mark my words, if he goes independent within 2 or 3 release cycles, he's looking for a distribution partner that looks a lot like the one he just left. Looking at the bigger picture though, and this is the one I want y'all to really think about, what this entire episode has done to the discourse around artist independence is genuinely damaging. Because Drake's fight against UMG wasn't just his fight, it got framed publicly as a landmark moment for artists' rights. There were fans and commentators treating his lawsuit filings like they were as significant as Prince's catalog battles. That comparison was always ridiculous, but now that it's playing out toward a label re-signing while the lawsuit is still technically alive on appeal, it retroactively makes all the artists who actually did fight the label system look like they're being lumped in with someone who is playing a character. 5 years from now, the Iceman era is going to be studied as a case study in narrative construction, in how a major artist used the language of rebellion to rebuild fan engagement after a cultural lull. Not as a cautionary tale about label corruption. The label was never really the enemy in this story. The enemy was Drake's declining relevance, and UMG was the convenient villain his team handed him. Whatever happens, new deal, independence attempt, or something nobody's predicting right now, one thing is already settled. The Drake versus the Machine story was the Machine's idea too. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed uncovering the real story, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss when we expose what everyone else is too scared to say. Ring that bell for notifications. And if you want more truth bombs like this, click on one of these videos next. Trust me, you'll want to see what we found. A few things I flagged while writing. The source videos claim that a specific new UMG deal is already confirmed, goes beyond what's actually verified, What's confirmed is that Drake reportedly fulfilled his contract, that industry sources expect a new deal, and that Akademiks publicly theorized it. I kept that distinction in the script using reportedly and framing AK's comments as what they are, commentary, not leaked contracts. That keeps it monetization safe and accurate. The Rocky Tour outro section is based on the verified hot new hip-hop report about the owl/rat visuals. I noted in Part C that the interpretation is analytically built out, since even HNCH called it speculative. That's fine for a take-based YouTube script, just flagging so you know where the lines are. Everything else, the 3 albums, the UMG stamp, the lawsuit timeline, the Akademiks Vlad TV comments, Rocky's Stolia flow, is confirmed across multiple outlets.